How's it going, guys? This is the Fish Keeperist here to talk a little bit about how to breed Neocaridinas for profit. This is going to be more for the easier Neocaridinas, even though they're all pretty easy. What I have here is Blue Dreams. Very easy to breed. The majority of people have success with Blue Dream shrimp. Basically, any blue Neocaridina will have the same easy to breed kind of characteristics. I know red ones will be just as easy for the most part. There's a few others that are harder, like orange and yellows. Those they might take a little more tweaking of the parameters to get them correctly and more acclimated to your tank. But eventually you can still get them to breed like wild cockroaches, really. But so I just wanted to break down a little bit of like, what do you do, like if you want to breed these for profit or something like that, or if you wanted to just I don't know, just be kind of successful at least with these guys. I found out a few things already over just research and experience setting up a few different tanks here at my house and with family who have tanks who have been successful, because I've kind of like coached them through doing all this. I've come to find a few little like tips that have kind of helped them and me get better numbers. And that's really what I'm kind of more focused in, getting good numbers out of your culture versus just like, hey, I have 10 of them and now I have 15, and months and months go by and you're like, man, I still have only like 15 or whatever. I'm talking like getting them to explode or whatever, being really successful with them, basically, where like, oh, I started with 10, now I have 100 or whatever. So one of the few things I wanted to hit first was tank size. If you really want to start a culture of these guys, well, not a culture, I guess, start like a group, start like a nice culture, I guess. What you want to do is you want to get a small tank. Well, at least in my experience, what I've seen is longer tanks as far as like left to right dimensions are not as immediately successful as smaller tanks in the X to Y dimension, because from what I noticed is when you have a longer tank, it's harder for the shrimp to actually get to be next to each other. When the female is in her stage where she wants the male to breed with her, she lets out some pheromones, and in the longer, bigger tank, the males take longer to find them. They might not even find them at all. And if you only have small numbers, then you're really limiting yourself to like get actual breeding going on. So I like to say, if you really want to start, if you have the ability to, I would start with a 5-gallon tank, like a standard 5-gallon, and then as your numbers get big, migrate everything to a bigger tank. If you start with a big tank, you can still be successful, but it might take longer. I've had situations where we've started a Blue Dream colony. That's the word I was looking for. Colony, and in a shallow, like 35-inch long tank, and I started with 10, and it just took forever for them to actually start breeding. Whereas in this tank, it's an 8-gallon tank. It's more of a tall tank instead of a longer tank or whatever, so it's not a standard size tank. And I started with 10, maybe even 8, and now I'm pushing. Well, it's hard for me to pinpoint how much I have in here because there's babies, and I do sell some to the local fish stores here and there. So at any given moment, I'll have anywhere from like 40 to 100, really. And I like to keep somewhere around 60. So right now I'm a little low, but I have tons of babies everywhere, so I'm not really counting those guys, the babies. And as you can see, you really don't see that many shrimp here, so it's not like it's too many. I don't think there's a big deal with like overstocking. I think even a 5-gallon tank, you can probably still have a good like 80 shrimp in there. without many problems. Now, no guarantees. You still want more space eventually when you have a bigger colony. But at the beginning, I believe that keeping them all huddled together and keeping them safe with like things like plants and just like obstacles and stuff keeps them more, I guess, safe and more comfortable. Also, at the beginning stages of your colony, I might not even add any other fish. I would probably wait until you already have a couple batches born already. Especially since, let's say you do start with 10, which is a good number, right? 10 shrimp of anything is probably going to be about $5 each. That's $50. You might even get them cheaper than that, right? So, but normally 10 is where most people start, or maybe even less if you want to challenge yourself. But you really got to think about this. These guys are like insects. They are related, like they're related to insects, really. You want a couple queens, right? Think of them like ants. You kind of want, well, they're probably more like roaches, but you want a few females. Like you probably want more females than males, but you still need males. So when you get 10, you're kind of hoping that you get at least 3 females and the rest males, or you vice versa. But you want to make sure that you don't get a situation where you get all females or whatever. But anyways, that's going off subject. But so you want to start with the biggest amount you can, but most people start with around 10. It's a good number to start with. But if you're looking at starting with 10 in a 5-gallon tank, that's kind of a perfect situation. Now, if you start with 10 in a big tank, a 20-gallon or something like that, then it might take longer for them to actually start to breed. So you want to make sure that you get a good amount, a good tank size for the amount of shrimp that you're getting to start with. So at the beginning, you don't really want to have fish in there. I wouldn't suggest it because most fish will eat shrimp babies, at least. Shrimps are at the bottom of the food chain in the wild, so their babies are at the bottom of the bottom. Any fish that actually spots one will probably try to eat it as long as they are driven to eat it, basically. Some fish don't have the drive to want to hunt shrimp, whereas some will. Tiger barb, for example, or something like that, will most likely go after a baby that's on the glass. Now, I wouldn't put tiger barbs in a shrimp tank, but that's just an example. Here I have emerald eye rasboras, very smallmouth fish. Normally, I have not seen them take out any of my fish. Any of my shrimp, but then again, I didn't add these guys until after my colony was already started and going good. So I would restrict any kind of fish. A lot of people think that cories are a good idea. Well, I wouldn't use a cory. Probably not at the beginning either. Corydoras catfish share the same space as the shrimp for the most part. They're at the bottom, and they're going to be disturbing the shrimp. Depending on how big the cory is, it'll also probably eat baby shrimp, and a lot of baby shrimp do hang out on the bottom as well, so they probably will do more damage than like a little rasbora or a neon tetra would, because they're down there with the shrimp. Not to say that you can't, but if you did want to add cories, probably start with small cories, like pygmy cories. Big cories would probably do okay, but again, you're gonna have to be okay with the fact that they're probably gonna munch on a few shrimps here and there. And if you're okay with that, and you're okay with basically not allowing your colony to thrive without that cory, then go for it. You know, I get it. At one point, I wanted to do pygmy cories, but and I might still in the future. So also another thing is, if you ask something like that, like a bottom dweller, if you just started your tank with shrimp, they're not going to allow the shrimp to have the peace to actually start a colony. The more safe the shrimp feel, the sooner they'll start breeding. And that's not always true. I mean, some shrimp will just start breeding regardless, but you kind of want to set yourself up for success, and having basically any fish in there will affect it most likely negatively, because what you don't want is, you want this basically. You want the shrimp to be doing this. You see that? Just eating, just grazing. You don't want them to be doing the flicking thing where they're like jumping right? Where they jump like a little octopus, because that's just stressful for them. So just keep that in mind. You probably want to be by himself. It's more of a species tank if you really want them to thrive. Otherwise, go for it. Put other fish in there. But always remember that baby shrimp are a big part of the food chain. So another thing is heated tanks. I mean heaters in these tanks. I wouldn't suggest using a heater in your tank unless you lived in an area where your temperatures dropped very low. But even then, I believe some people have had success with breeding neos outside, even in the summer. I mean, even in the winter. So take that kind of like as a, I don't really know, to be honest, because I live in a more of a hot weather area. So either way, I don't. I wouldn't worry too much because these guys can handle temperatures of like 65 degrees, and I think even lower than that. Probably more temporary though if you go lower than 65. And this is Fahrenheit, by the way. And they can go up to 85, I think I've heard. I wouldn't go that high, at which point, because at that point you might start getting pink shrimp, which means you're cooking them at that point. You're kind of boiling them. Most fish can't even handle 85 anyways. You only really want to do 85 with fish when you're trying to get rid of some kind of disease, or unless you have a ram, or maybe like a discus. Those guys can handle that. But I think most room temperature water is going to be anywhere around 65 to 70. So I would say you're fine. If your temperature stays at that point, even if it drops a little more, it's fine. Even if it goes up a little more, I would stick to 65 to 80, 82. And I've had success with all those temperatures in between. I also don't worry about temperature going up and down too much. Again, unless you're living in a situation where temperature drops within minutes, then I wouldn't worry about it, which is like almost impossible. So I wouldn't worry about heat too much, unless you live in areas where you have extreme heat or extreme cold. Let's see. Let's talk about TDS or hardness of water. Neocaridinas do better in hard water. I think it's recommended that you stay with hard water. Here I do use hard water. Well, actually no, I use RO water, which is no minerals at all. I add some GH powder from some leftover that I had from bee shrimps that I failed at keeping, and then I add a bunch of crushed coral, which is what you see in the ground right there, the white powder. It's not powder though, it's just crushed coral. And I like to keep my TDS at around a little over 250. I have successfully bred neos at a pH of 150, and I had no problems with that. I just feel like I think they do way better, and around 250 or something like that, 300. For that, you probably want a TDS meter. You don't need a TDS meter per se, but if you want to keep steady parameters, I guess it'd be a good idea. They're pretty cheap. I use this one. This is the one I use. You get it on Amazon. It's like less than 20 bucks. I forget how much it was. I think it's like 15 or something like that. It's not that bad. It helps, especially if you want to get into the more expensive shrimp later. But for neos, it's not a necessity, but it's a cool little practice to do to get into harder keeping shrimp, harder shrimp keeping. Yeah. Crushed coral is a thing I believe in. If you used sink water with, for example, like Prime, if you have a TDS meter, you can kind of tell how hard the water is just by doing that. I don't really use sink water here because the sink water in my county is like liquid rock. It's like 8.0 pH. It's like 500 TDS or whatever the legal highest amount is. It's pretty high. So I once in a while, if I'm low on water, I will add that water, but it'll only be like a gallon maybe. So that's like 1/8 of this water. I don't really do more than that. I might do 2/8 of the water, which is like what, 1/4 of the water, because I have 8 gallon. But I don't do like half, because I think I do think that if I did half the water change, and it was all just sink water, which is completely different pH, completely different everything. That might actually stress the shrimp. Although these shrimp are pretty hardy. I've literally moved shrimp from 3 different tanks, each time letting the shrimp be in there for like 15-20 minutes, and then put it back into the regular tank, and it was fine, never died or anything like that. So these shrimp are pretty hardy, so I never had problems with that. But I wouldn't want to do that, because you might stress the female, and the female will drop the eggs. I've had that happen before, where a female has eggs, and then you did something weird with the water change, and then the next day it has no more eggs. It just dropped them. So you want to keep the parameters steady by knowing where your water's coming from, and making sure that you always try to stay within the same parameters you're already using. So that's why I use crushed coral and the bee shrimp. If I had the salty shrimp for Neos, I would just use that, but I don't, and I have this already, and this was pretty expensive, so I use some of this. I don't use a lot, I just use a little, just to kind of help with the water hardness. Let's see, let's talk about the most important thing. I think is food. I like to feed a diverse amount of food. I don't feed like vegetables and stuff like that. I stick to food that you buy off the shelf, kind of, but I'm sure you can do that. It's just that it's more of a hassle using those kind of foods, like a cucumber and stuff like that, because if you forget to remove the cucumber, then you get it just messes up your water quality and stuff. So I don't like it. Staple are these two, crab cuisine and mini algae wafers. I started with this and I was having a lot of success, and I kept doing it for a while. I also use bug bites because of the fish that are in there eat bug bites. Tropical fish crisps, tropical crisp flakes, I think, or crisps, whatever they are, from Tetra. I also use. I don't have it with me. I ran out. Those are the 3 staples. Basically, this is just whatever lands on the ground. They eat it. The biggest thing that helped with I also use Rapashi, either in the gel form or powder form. I actually stopped using powder form because I got a better solution for powder form, but this in a gel is really good for shrimp. They really like it. The 2 biggest game changers for me were these 2, and I'm sure Shrimp King has tons more. This is a Snow Pop. It's basically it's fiber. I forgot what it is. I think it's like bean shells or something like that. But it's this little shell. This little stick. Throw it in there. Actually, I'll show you. It expands into like a nice flaky. Oh, it's soybean shells, or soybean, I guess. It expands into a nice fluffy powder. There you go. It's a lot of brightness there. And then you see it start to slowly expand. Let me actually dim this light so you can see better. And then it's really good for them. That started helping a lot. But one of the big ways you can be successful with babies, because after the parents, the mom, the female has the eggs. Lays the babies, or I guess gives birth to babies, because they give birth to live babies. They're live bearers. The babies are on their own, and the babies will start eating off of algae or whatever they can find on the ground. Adult shrimp will always scare the little ones, maybe not on purpose, but they just kind of will. All the shrimp rush to food like this dish, and if you see here, there's no babies eating it. Right, the little guys hang out in the corners and stuff like that by themselves. So you really want to make sure you get food to those guys. And once you've mastered being able to give them food, then all you have to worry about is I'm sorry, lost train of thought. I was talking to my son. The biggest deal is getting the food to the babies, and for that I use Bacter AE. There's a like a shrimplet food. This is the regular Bacter AE. It's basically fine powder. It coats the whole tank with food, basically tiny food that the shrimp, that the baby shrimp will be able to eat. And you see here, it comes with a little scoop. I don't want to spill this. And this is fine powder. So there's a dosage on the can, or you can go online. But I just do like a half a scoop of stuff. But I never feed this and also food because I feel like it's too much for my water. Although it'll probably handle it once your tank is, you know, correctly cycled. And actually, I forgot to talk about cycling your tank, but we'll talk about that after. So this stuff has made a big difference. I see tons and tons more babies now with this one, and I continue to see those babies grow. Whereas before, I would see babies and then I'm like, what happened to them? What happened to the babies? Who knows? With these, the babies that are in here actually eat well. So I do this, some people do it every day. I do it like 3 or 4 times a week. And just to make sure whatever babies around, whatever shrimp babies are wandering around will get food. I think this is the best food for baby shrimps. Adult shrimps will eat it too, but this stuff is like really nice. It also, I think, promotes the growth of like microfauna and stuff like that on surfaces and stuff like that. So other fish will eat that actually, like otters and panda loaches and stuff like that tend to enjoy eating that as well. So yeah, that's the biggest stuff. Now there's obviously more to this whole like raising the shrimp and everything and selling it and stuff, but for now that's the biggest important thing, like making sure your heat is correct. Obviously they're not that fidgety about heat though. Keeping your parameters correct as far as like TDS and tank size. Again, if you get too big of a tank for your colony starter, they won't have the connection, I guess, physical connection to each other that you might get from a smaller tank. And make sure you pick the right shrimp inhabitants. I would actually not pick anything. I wouldn't keep any kind of tank mates in there. It's up to you though. And then always make sure that your tank has been cycled correctly. Ammonia does kill everything, really. I mean, it'll kill shrimp too. So yeah, and then once you get a good population, one of the big things that people do that kind of messes you up and sets you back, I did it, is you're like, oh, I have like 30, 40 shrimp in here. Wow. All right, let me call up my local fish store and I'm gonna tell them I'll give them some, you know, give them some credit or whatever. And then you take like 20 and now you're left with like 15 shrimp again or whatever. And then you're set way back again. So you want to make sure that you don't start to harvest any shrimp out until you get good numbers first. But that's all I have for now. If you guys think of anything else, let me know in the comment section below. For the most part, I think I covered a good amount of stuff. I'm not saying this is the end-all be-all of how to keep shrimp and how to be successful with shrimp, but I think that's a good way to get started with shrimp. Again, this is the stuff that I use. And I'll leave you with that, guys. Like and subscribe if you can. And I'll, post some other videos of some random stuff. Thanks.